Hello, everyone, and welcome to the CoROM podcast. This is where academic medicine meets remote, austere, and resource-limited areas. Welcome back to the program. This is Aebhric O'Kelly. This week, we are with Eric Bauer from FlightBridge Ed. Eric is a pillar in the nursing and paramedic education community. His company is one of the best options out there for paramedics and nurses to prepare for their board certifications. Eric, welcome to the program.
Hey, buddy. Thanks for having me.
So tell us a bit about yourself and what keeps you busy.
Well, these days, obviously I get to do a lot of travel, doing our critical care courses and working with different agencies around the world. Wish I had a little bit more time at home with a family, but definitely love my downtime. Love just spending time with my wife and our son, and we've got two young labs, a golden retriever and a black lab, that keep us busy and just enjoying being at home.
Nice. And we met last January at the conference here in Valletta, and that was your first experience in Malta, wasn't it?
Yeah. It was. I've been fortunate to be able to travel to some amazing places, but I got to say that Malta is right up there with some of the top, and I think I loved how ancient it is. I love the you can tell it has been there a long time, and I love the history. Definitely very quaint. You have that Italian kind of feel, but it's you got the Maltese side and a little Sicily there. Definitely looking forward to going back.
And Malta has the oldest structure on the planet, the oldest building that still stands.
I didn't know that.
It was put up, they think, by the Phoenicians in 8,000 BC. And yeah, it's just a bunch of stones on top of each other. It's part of a house. Yeah.
So, and we go back quite a ways. I think the first time, we had never met in person, but we had corresponded via email. And you had used our products for some of your courses, kind of dating back to 2015, 16. So I think we'd always been acquainted, and we were always very grateful that you chose us. Well,
FlightBridge Ed is definitely one of the pillars in the community, and you started it, and you've pushed it to be this major player in advanced medical training, and you started this, and how did you manage to push this to be, well, you are a world leader in medical education. How did that come about?
Yeah, I sometimes sit here and wonder, I think looking back now, right, we're year 12, going on year 13. You definitely have to have really great people around you that help you become successful. So I definitely want to highlight the team that we put around the product or the thought of FlightBridge Ed. But really initially, 2008, I moved from Oregon to Tennessee and started flying air medical in the Tennessee, Kentucky area. I started doing a lot of outreach education in different states, Tennessee, Kentucky, Ohio, Indiana, places like that. And I think that's where I really fell in love with, I'd always loved teaching. I had taught in different realms throughout my EMT and paramedic career, but that was to a different level. About that same time, 2009, Scott Weingart came out with the Aebhric podcast, and that was my first introduction to a podcast. There was another podcast that I thought was really outstanding back then called ICU Rounds by Jeff Guy, and between those two podcasts, man, I just could not get enough. And I think Aebhric really spoke to me in one of the things, his slogan or his mission statement was take upstairs care, ICU level care, downstairs to the ED. And that really resonated with me. I thought, man, what a brilliant thought, right? Expand maybe the ED's level of care to include critical care. And then, over the next couple of years, as I taught in the outreach education space and flew in those areas. I had flown about 9 years at that point. You fly into these rural areas and you find, let's just be honest, you find medicine being done maybe a little outdated in some places, right? And it wasn't that they weren't trying to do the very best for their patients, but what I kind of hypothesized was we have an information gap. We're not getting the evidence-based practice from these hospitals to these rural areas. And I just kept seeing it happen over and over and over. Every shift, I could identify a need. And so, it came down to, I knew I wanted to do something. I went to my wife, Ashley, and I told her I wanted to do something. I didn't know what that was. I moved to Air Methods Corporation when Ashley and I got serious. We hadn't gotten married yet, and I had switched companies, and that's when I met Evan Claunch. And Evan was another flight paramedic at that base. He had an IT background. We kind of befriended each other, became close, and I brought the idea to him. So really, FlightBridge Ed would not be here without Evan and his abilities to build a website, to build the initial RSS feed. Told him I wanted to do a podcast. I didn't know anything about podcasting. Obviously, podcasting was in really the beginning stages when you compare it to now. There wasn't any platforms that really hosted podcasts per se. And so, really he built the infrastructure, and really my role was to come up with the content, record the content, and start putting out the content. And so he did all the editing, I did all the recording, and we just started being consistent, right? Came up with a name, and the name came from, we were sitting across the table from each other at shift change. He was coming off shift, I was coming on shift. And I said, I want flight nurses and flight paramedics what I said was, I want paramedics and nurses that want to seek a critical care job to become better critical thinkers. And so I said, I want to bridge the gap between ground and ER or ICU care to the flight environment. And so that's where the flight came in, and then bridging the gap. And then, so he said, well, let's call it FlightBridge. And I said, well, what about the education piece? And that's where ED came on the end, FlightBridge Ed. So that's really honestly how the name came. And so we just started putting out podcasts every 2 weeks. I was very consistent, never missed a podcast. And it started super, super slow, like you would imagine, right? 25 downloads, 30 downloads. But it just, I think the consistency and word of mouth, it all was word of mouth, and we all of a sudden realized that we had something. I mean, the podcast just started growing exponentially. And so really that is really where it started. It never was meant to be a business. It was never meant to be anything other than a podcast. I never planned on doing anything other than fly as a flight paramedic or be an educator, maybe later in my career. And so a lot of this has come by surprise. I would have never thought, if I looked in the future, that I would be leading a company and to see that we have this team in place that executes at such a high level, and that we're able to deliver this content to providers all over the world.
So it's kind of like you took what Scott Weingart did about ICU medicine downstairs in the ER, and you took that as ER medicine out to pre-hospital.
Absolutely. Yeah, I got it. And that's what I try to tell people. Like, I didn't come up with the idea. Like, I took an idea that he had, and I put a spin on it, and I applied it to the pre-hospital setting. I mean, that's really honestly what I did. And so I owe everything to Scott Weingart. I really do. He planted that seed. He really is that pioneer in thinking outside the box. I try to be a good steward of what he started on his end, and try to take those lessons and try to take exactly that model and spin it to the pre-hospital side. And there's a lot of differences there, right? Because he's a physician. He can speak more broadly. He can make stronger statements. He can take stances. at the end of the day, I'm still a paramedic, and so I've got to understand that what I say has to be a little bit more careful, and that's been a learning process. But man, it's still to this day the most rewarding piece of what we get to do is to put out that free content.
And Scott Weingart is now more of a role in your organization, isn't he?
I wouldn't say he's a role. I mean, we're super blessed to be able to have him at the FAST conference, right? Our FAST symposium, which stands for FlightBridge Ed Air and Surface Transport Symposium. It will be next, June 10th, 11th, 12th. And he's our opening keynote speaker. Our chief medical director for FlightBridge Ed is Michael Loria. Michael Loria is an ex-PJ. He's a emergency physician that has a fellowship in emergency medical services and a fellowship in critical care, and he's also a content writer for MCRIT. And so that is really the introduction to MCRIT from my standpoint. I've never really reached out to Scott Weingart. I've always tried to respect his space, and so tried to do things on our own. But it's been nice to be able to have Dr. Loria on our team, and he was able to. Scott really has been gracious with his time to be able to come and open our conference and spend the conference with us. A lot of people are really excited about that.
Have you met him before?
I have not met him before. I've seen him a couple times at SMAC when I would go to SMAC, but I've never personally met him. No.
Did you make it to SMAC Dub? Is that where you saw him?
I didn't. I did not make it to SMAC Dub. Saw him in Chicago. Yeah. So, looking forward to be able to talk to him and pick his brain, and again. But I'm always really careful. People's time is valuable, and so I just want to make sure I respect that.
So it is important to respect space, and you'll obviously have a chance in the next fortnight to see him. That's yeah. And John Clark, you met him at Air Methods, is that right?
Yeah. So where did I meet John Clark? John Clark being the chief operating officer for so long of the IBSC and our relationship, FlightBridge Ed. We're one of the top providers of review courses and recertification for the flight paramedic or critical care paramedic. And so that relationship has just been fostered over years of working alongside the IBSC in our role as an education provider. And so, yeah, I've known John now for 10 years plus.
So you met him through IBSC?
I met him through IBSC, yeah. That's how I initially met him. Met him at conferences, they would have the IBSC booth and do things. We've done little education pieces, or the relationship is just fostered over the years. I think we've tried to be a really good steward of providing the education and maintaining accreditation and trying to lead the way, and I think that relationship has just naturally blossomed just based on that synergy. Ultimately, we wouldn't be in business, right, without the IBSC, and the IBSC is essential to what we do. That's
how I found your company and starting. So you're flying John out here to Malta starting in 2014, and I think he mentioned FlightBridge Ed, and so I took a few courses and saw the level of training you were doing, and we were not there by any means, and it was great to see what should be, at what level is the standard for these IBSC review courses, and you shed the light on what should be the teaching. I mean, there's tons of them out there, and I've taken a few of them that are rubbish. To be, and I'm sure you're quite aware of them as well. There's like 30 or 40 programs now that are approved by IBSC But I imagine you're probably the largest one to put people through, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the numbers. I would say we're probably in the top 2 or 3. Again, they don't release those. I know how many students that we have per year, and we have, I think, over 22,000 on our LMS alone. So, are those all people that are preparing for the FPC or the CCPDSC? No. But, from our live review courses this year, we'll teach 35 live review courses around the world, which is a lot. And, we average 30, 35 students a course. So, we definitely have the numbers there, but they don't release those numbers. I think to add on to what you said, I appreciate the comments on the content. I think I would be wrong to say that has not been a learning process, right? You start out. I think I always felt like I could deliver the content. That was never the problem. Now that doesn't mean I haven't learned and grown through the process, because I think you become a better instructor the more you do it. Where I've had to really learn is the technology side. You think back at our first podcast, and first probably dozen podcasts in the equipment I was using. It's laughable, right? And to see the equipment that we have now at our disposal, that we've learned about. I'm definitely probably a late adopter when it comes to technology, and I've had to really flip that switch and become an early adopter, or be willing to be an early adopter, and always try to raise the bar at delivering content. I'm not an artistic person. I can have a level of creativity, but I have to have some type of, it's hard. It's like I have to be inspired in a certain way. And so that doesn't always come real easy. And so I've had to learn that part. I think I've once I see something, if I see something I like, whether that's in just the real, in other pieces of education or in everyday life, and I can see something and say, man, that really translates to maybe a way we should deliver education. And I can usually replicate that. But again, it's come with just trying to learn software, learn different ways of delivering that content, to the point where the newest content that we have, we actually hired a full-time production guy, and he worked for us for about 18 months and had him on salary. And he had abilities that far exceeded anything that I would ever know. I mean, and so that took our content to a completely second level that I could not have done myself. So I think it's learning also to surround yourself with people that are talented in those specific areas and release that, right? It's kind of like a book I'm reading right now, Buy Back Your Time. Hire people to do the things that they do well, and you concentrate on areas that you excel in. And it's kind of, rinse and repeat, and trust those people around you. And I think that's where I've really tried to focus on, is what can I do to better myself as a teacher, hire the people that can present the material or record the material in a way that is super engaging. And, I think that's where we're at today.
Your passion for education is obvious, and you've pushed that passion. You're in a doctoral program. Tell us a bit about your Doctor of Education you're going through.
Yeah. I'm my story, man. Very few people know I'm a high school dropout. And, it wasn't because I couldn't do it. It was, it just life. You think I thought I was in love, and thought, I need to support her, and so I'll just quit school, go get my GED, which I did. I went right and tested for my GED, passed it, and immediately enrolled in the Army, National Guard, right around the first Gulf War. Ended up getting medically discharged, and so then I'm out, and realized now I've got to figure out how to support us, right? And so, my college pursuits have been really based on those early decisions of realizing that I made some pretty grave mistakes in my path. I made my path a lot harder, and I think a lot of us can probably go back to our early years and realize, man, what were we thinking? So, when I got my paramedic degree at Oregon, I'm from Southern Oregon. Oregon's a degree required state. Got my associates, and then I got a second associate's transfer degree a few years later, and then ended up getting a bachelor's degree in business in 2013, a master's degree in business in 2016, and I'd always wanted to do a doctorate, but I didn't want to just do a doctorate to do a doctorate, and I kind of say all that to lead up to, when I found this program is a doctorate in education that's focused on health professions education, and I just couldn't pass it up. I mean, it had a couple of my mentors vet the program and look at the curriculum and really give me their thoughts on if they felt like it was a good program, and they both thought that the curriculum was pretty dynamic. I've been extremely impressed with the program thus far, and I'm in my last year. I should graduate next summer, and it's been super rewarding. I'm super excited about it. I'm right now in the very preliminary stages of kind of honing down my research topic and my clinical question, and start working towards that final publication. So pretty excited about that, and I think the other thing I'd be remiss to not say is my brother, my late brother, passed away 2 years ago, and or not quite 2 years ago, and he was a PhD math professor, much more difficult than anything I'll ever do, as far as doctorate goes.
Indeed.
And, there's a part of me that wants to finish this for him too. And, lost him young. He's younger than me, a couple years younger. And so that's left a pretty big hole. So, that's something that in the back of my mind is fueling me that I don't really share with many people, that I just can't wait to walk across that stage and be able to honor him.
That's a profound motivation, and you need motivation to get through to the doctorate. And do you mind if I ask your dissertation topic?
Yeah, let me pull it up so I can read it to you. So I'm kind of down to two different ideas. The one I'm leaning towards, my clinical question would be comparative effectiveness of distance learning and didactic methods for clinical competency assessment. So looking at the distance learning piece, which is something we do at FlightBridge Ed, and looking at clinical competency. So how to do that, right? So really investigate innovative assessment and evaluation methods that accurately measure student competencies, clinical reasoning, and decision-making skills. The research would compare traditional assessment methods with novel approaches such as portfolio assessments or adaptive testing, and explore their impacts on student learning and feedback. That's what I'm leaning towards. I have a couple other ideas that I'm debating, but I definitely feel like that is probably 90% decided, to the point where I've written that clinical question. And I think I can use data from or apply data just through FlightBridge Ed and through what we do on a day-to-day basis. So,
say 25,000 data points. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have a lot of students to be able to pull from, and we have courses that I can start focusing in on, maybe start giving them pre and post assessments, and really, try to figure out, specific data points that I'm looking for from a competency standpoint. Again, I'm still a little there's a lot that I don't know, right? And so I feel a little unprepared to discuss it because I just don't know. This semester I'm taking quantitative research, qualitative research, and instructional design. So I'm taking a full-time load. And the quantitative research course is a preparatory course that really starts working towards writing the dissertation, which will start next semester.
So you're thinking of a quantitative dissertation?
I am. The qualitative research course that I'm doing with it is it's a separate course. I think my brain just kind of focuses. It's drawn to the numbers. But I think you could also, I just wrote a paper on, if I were to do a qualitative study, I could do a case study, right? And maybe look at multiple cases in a specific target area, and then maybe try to extrapolate. But I don't know if that interests me.
I find quantitative so much easier for my head as well than trying to think of the abstractness of qualitative. Yeah,
I agree.
So, Eric, you attended the Special Operations Medical Association's conference a fortnight ago. How was that experience for you?
Yeah, that was it was amazing to just have a couple days there. I definitely feel like FlightBridge Ed will be there next year. We will definitely have a booth next year. I've already marked it on the calendar. So it was, I came there for just to be with you guys for CoROM and just see what it was all about. And I definitely think that audience is primed and ready for FlightBridge Ed, and you were able to direct quite a few customers towards FlightBridge Ed, just walk up customers to CoROM that had interest in flight paramedic or certification. So definitely going to be there moving forward. And I think looking back, it was never that we didn't want to be there, but you got to be honest. We can't be at every conference with my teaching schedule and speaking schedule. We have to usually pick 4 to 5 conferences a year to focus on, and I don't know if I felt like that was the best target market. Maybe it was, and maybe we were missing something. So I'm looking forward to being there next year.
Can I encourage you to submit an abstract for either speaking or running a workshop?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That would be, and we do that. Maybe we'll submit an abstract for our mechanical ventilation masterclass course, which we do at a lot of conferences. It always sells out. It's always a hot topic. So that might be a great idea.
And speaking of conferences, you came for a Medicine and Mediterranean conference in January, and you were the keynote speaker.
Yeah, looking forward to future years. Definitely was really enjoyed. I met so many people that I still stay in contact with. It was an intimate group, which I like. Looking forward to seeing the conference grow, and really love the diverse group that you brought together. I think that's what I love about, especially traveling overseas, is you get to meet people that you would never meet. And medicine, even though medicine is different everywhere. And so I love the diversity and getting to hear the differences in the stories and how they became physicians or paramedics. And I mean, just the paramedic field alone is so different in the U.S. compared to overseas in different countries. So again, I think that's the thing. You asked me a question earlier around, just FlightBridge Ed in general. And I go back to that paramedic that I was in Oregon before I moved to Tennessee. And Aebhric, man, I had no concept to what was out there. And to now be fast forward, that was 2008. I mean, we're going on 16 years plus. and my perspective of EMS and medicine in general is now global, right? I understand it, and there's so much more to learn. Like, there's so much I want to see around the world in these different countries that just it fascinates me.
One of the benefits of our college is how many countries I've been to talk to the ministers of health, or talk to the leaders in their national ambulance service, or to foster collaboration to see how they're doing things. And I've learned a lot from them as well as us. But it is so interesting to see the vast differences of healthcare in all these different countries.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think it's also something I've realized. We get requests constantly throughout the world, and we execute on some of them, and sometimes it's a cost thing. It's. I was just talking to Ashley about that. Is like, could we start building a nonprofit arm of FlightBridge Ed that maybe is focused on serving some of these under these countries that maybe don't have the budgets, or these companies that don't have the budgets, or these areas of need, and bring our education into those areas. I think that would be really rewarding, because I think there's a barrier sometimes to getting education to some of these areas, and how can we bridge that gap?
That's a passion of mine as well. I've been all over Africa doing free teaching. The college has donated IQ butterflies to a few different district hospitals, and like in Accra in Ghana, I went there and set up their national ambulance service to be a ACLS provider, because they didn't have that. And I set up that, and without any cost at all, set them up, trained them up, and got them. It was at 3 courses in a row, and now they're running their own ACLS, and they're their own provider. And I would bet that there's a pre-post study out there on patient outcomes in Accra just from implementation of a 2-day course that everyone in the U.S. has to take every 2. And we whinge about it too. We take it every 2 years. Like, I just took this course, I have to take it again, and we take it for granted. And something like that makes such a profound difference in some of these low to medium income countries.
Yeah, see, that's huge stuff, dude. Like, I just, that's stuff that's legacy stuff that you're talking about. You've left an amazing impact around the world, and a legacy in your own right, and to give back, and to bring that needed medicine, the education to these underserved areas. Man, like, that's just cool stuff to me. So I'm excited to be able to maybe partner with you on future ideas or ventures to where we can do more of that.
Speaking of partnership, so you just signed an official agreement between FlightBridge Ed and our college. Tell us about what is this collaboration? How will it work?
Yeah, this is pretty exciting stuff. Obviously, I think where we excel is content creation, and we have such a massive library of content now under the FlightBridge Ed umbrella, and so it's like, how can CoROM benefit from some of that content, or content creation, or maybe just from the consulting side of how could we construct existing content and couple it with content that FlightBridge Ed's already built. I think that it's really a blank canvas. I think it is it's cross-pollinating each other's brands. We've talked about, we have a university accredited 12 to 15 week course, and how does that translate to the European model for credit hours? And can we start moving paramedics here in the United States to bachelor's and master's degree preparation at the college, right? And so I think it's just that cross-pollination, excited about the contract. It's a 3-year term, and then we'll reevaluate that. And one of the areas that we've already started working towards is, CoROM will have a new training website, new training LMS, and so that is actually being created, and the branding has been all done, and so it's then now working with your IT department and our IT department to make sure that everything is set up correctly and start rebuilding current content based on phases and how you guys see the transition best fitting your strategic plan.
So you and John have created a brotherhood between our two organizations.
Yeah.
Eric, my final question for you is this. What advice do you have for the new paramedic, new nurse, or new doctor interested in working in austere or pre-hospital environments?
I think I don't know if it's truly advice. I think the thing that we have to continue to do and do well is we have to stay teachable. We've got to stay curious. We have to be humble enough to know our weaknesses and not be afraid to say, hey, I don't know this. Understand that if you have a tough patient and you felt uncomfortable with that patient, maybe it's because of a lack of knowledge in that area. Maybe it was something that was obscure that you really hadn't studied. You're always going to get those, but I think you have to take those opportunities and be self-aware enough to understand your own limitations, and then you have to go back to the books or seek out that information and study and become better. And I think I really believe if anybody does that, they will continue to grow in their career and really be able to serve the patients that we all set out to. That's why we got into these careers, is to serve our patients. I think that's the thing I see is, we've got to be, a lot of times we're young, we're more arrogant. Sometimes we're not teachable. Sometimes we're prideful. We've got to just check that stuff at the door and realize that there's always somebody smarter. There's always somebody that knows something that you don't know, and you got to be okay with that. And you just have to be self-aware enough to learn from every opportunity you have.
That's excellent advice, and man, it's been great to get you here on the podcast, and I look forward to seeing you again here in Malta and your wife, and thank you for joining our family.
Well, thank you. Yeah, no, really excited again. Thank you for having me on the podcast, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
This has been a presentation from the College of Remote and Offshore Medicine. If you would like to earn CPD credits for this podcast, you can join the Council of Members. Being a member of the college gives you free CPD credit, free access to our virtual field guide, and discounts on our e-learning courses. You can join the team on our college website at corom.edu.mt.